Hello, welcome back to my channel, and today I'm going to show you how to draft a basic bodice pattern. As many of you know, I draft all of my patterns, and I tend to make a new pattern for every project, which is kind of one of the most time-consuming parts. So I thought it would be a good idea to come up with a basic bodice pattern that can be altered in a lot of ways to be used for a bunch of different projects. I also know that when it comes to dresses especially, bodices are one of those things that a lot of people struggle with the most. And I totally understand the shape of the human body. It's weird. It's kind of confusing. I'm going to be drafting this pattern on myself. This is easiest to do on a mannequin, but of course, most people don't have a mannequin that exactly matches their body. Even mine does not match me perfectly. And yes, it can be difficult to reach a lot of the different parts of your body while you're drafting, but it is the best way to get a bodice that fits you well. All you're going to need to draft the pattern is a piece of fabric that you don't mind losing. It should be something that's not stretchy. You'll also need a pencil, plenty of pins, and a pair of scissors. So with all that said, let's get drafting this bodice. Alright, because we're drafting this directly on the body, you're going to want to wear something like a skin-tight tank top, like this. You'll also want to wear a bra underneath or any other type of shapewear that you would normally be wearing. For my fabric, I just have these polyester scraps that are pieces of an old sheet, and this is not stretchy whatsoever, which is what you want. I also recommend picking something that doesn't have a pattern, just because it makes everything a little bit more visually clear and you can see what's going on a bit better. So starting with my first piece of fabric, you're going to want it to have one perfectly straight edge. And you're going to line up this straight edge with the middle of your neck, going straight down to the middle of your waist. This is because for drafting a pattern like this, we're only going to be drafting one half. So I can pin this straight edge going down the middle of my body. I can pin it to the shirt down here, but obviously I can't pin it to my neck. So I'm just going to use a piece of tape. You're going to want to tape it really close to the top of your neck. This might seem really weird. This is only temporary. And to keep this held up, I'm also going to pin this to the strap of my tank top. And now I'm going to pin it down here at my waist. Obviously, be very careful when you're doing this. You don't want to poke yourself. So just sort of delicately pull the fabric away from your body when you stick a pin in. Try and stand with as normal of a posture as possible. Okay, here's our very weird situation. You're going to want to smooth out the front. So obviously, like at the side of your bust and everything, it's going to be all like baunchy and weird. You're just going to want it to be smooth on the front for now. So I'm going to smooth it out, and I'm going to put a pin around here, just a little further to the side on my waist. I'm also going to put a few more pins just right here on this straight edge in the middle so that it doesn't move around. It's very useful to do this in front of a mirror, by the way, so that you don't have to look down, because that does mess with the fabric and your posture. Okay, now I'm going to smooth this down from my shoulder. I'm going to smooth it sort of down to the side of my bust and into sort of my armpit area. You basically want this whole area on your upper chest and your shoulder to be nice and smooth. And I'm going to put a pin right near my armpit. It doesn't quite look entirely smooth because you can see my strap under there, but this is pretty much as smooth as I can get it. Here is the situation a little closer up. You can see that most of this baggy fabric is gathering around the side of my body over here. Oh, also at this point, because most of this is holding up, I'm going to untape it from my neck. I'm going to take that tape off. Obviously this part is drooping, but that's fine. The fabric is still staying up. So how do we get rid of so much extra fabric over here? I'm going to show you how to make two different darts, one right here and one right here. These won't both be necessary for everyone. I'm probably only going to actually need one right here, but if you have a little bit of a bigger chest, then one here is really useful. I'm going to get my pencil out now, and I'm going to draw a line from this pin that we put here earlier that's like right next to the armpit, and I'm going to draw a line towards the center of my bust. Since it's pencil, it's pretty faint, but you can see it right there. This is, of course, where the seam for this dart is going to be. Now I'm going to pick up some of this baggier fabric and lift it up towards this dart. So now I have a little bit of fabric pinched right along this line. And I want you to take note that I haven't gotten rid of all of this baggy fabric here, and you don't quite want to. You just want the side of the bust to be a little bit more fitted. So this fabric that I have pinched right here, I'm going to fold it upward and pin it like that. And you can sort of see and feel under there where there's that bit of fabric that's folded right where the line we drew is. And you're just going to draw that line again on top of the fabric now that it's folded. So I personally am very flat-chested, so this dart, as you can see, is microscopic. I personally don't really need it to be there, so I'm going to unpin it. But if you have a larger chest, this is probably going to be necessary. But now that it's unfolded, you can see we sort of drew a triangle there. This is where we drew the line first, and then we folded the fabric up and drew the line again. So when you unfold it, you have a dart. So because I am not very gifted up top, let's say, I can basically make this bodice fit my bust with just one dart. If you are a little more flat-chested like me, you can do this all with just that one dart on the side like I just showed you. It'll just be a little bit more substantial, and you'll want to smooth out all of the rest of this fabric on the side. This is kind of what that would look like. This dart is a little bit more substantial now, and this would work just fine. However, I personally really like the look of the dart under here. I find it has a little bit more of a 1950s-ish effect. So for me personally, I'm not going to do the side dart, I'm just going to do the underneath one. In case you want to see, here's what the pattern looks like with two darts. If you're not sure if you need two, or if you want to do the side one or the bottom one, I would recommend just kind of playing with the fabric, try all of the options, and see what feels best and what fits you the best. To do the bottom dart, I'm going to smooth it all out on the front and draw a line from my waist right up towards my bust. Now I'm basically going to do this one the same way I did the side one. I'm just going to smooth out all of this excess fabric on the side towards that line that we just drew. I'm going to put a few pins around where I've smoothed the fabric out on the side just so it stays where I put it. If you're wondering if this makes your arms sore, absolutely yes it does. So I'm just going to gather all of this fabric into this dart. The angle of this dart is also totally up to you. It can go straight down, it can go a little more this way. I really like it to go a little more in towards my waist because it just gives more of like an hourglass illusion. So once again, I'm going to fold this excess fabric that I have pinched at the dart. I'm going to fold it over the line that we drew and pin it in place. And now I'm going to relax my shoulder for a second because dang does that make you sore. Okay, at this point it is largely a lot of just fiddling slowly to smooth spots out and putting pins where you smooth it out so that it stays. So this part can be just very tedious. Okay, so it's looking pretty good. So while I'm just smoothing everything out, I want to mention that if you are just doing this underneath dart, I recommend really focusing on smoothing it out around the armpit so that it's really tight. If you don't have that side dart, it can be easy to just kind of accidentally ignore how it fits around the armpit. And then you might end up with the armhole just being a little bit gapey. I'm also just going to put a few more pins on this dart to make it stay so I can really see how it's fitting. Something you might also notice is that it does not want to lay flat on the waist. This is basically because your hips are disturbing things a little bit, so we need to cut the waistline. So once again, taking my pencil and drawing a line where my natural waist is. And you're going to draw this line all the way to the side seam. I can feel the side seam of my tank top underneath, so that's where I'm going to put the side seam on my bodice. And I am just going to cut right along the waist. Obviously, be very careful to not cut your clothes. And now you can see when I stand up nice and straight that there isn't any weird pulling right at the waistline anymore because my hips basically aren't in the way. And once again, we're going to grab the pencil and draw a line where the side seam is, or where you want the side seam to be. So the thing right here is that I'm not actually going to cut right along the line that I just drew because I have pins right where that line is. So I'm going to cut just a little bit outside of that, and when I take this off of my body later, I can cut where I drew the line. This is incredibly awkward to cut, but oh well. And now of course we need to cut the armhole. I just cut off a bunch of the excess fabric over here because there was just like a lot hanging over my arm. And now I'm going to grab my pencil again and draw the armhole. Okay, I'm unpinning this from the strap because I kind of need to take it off myself a little bit so that I can actually cut it. And yes, this is incredibly awkward, but you know, you gotta do what you gotta do. That was like the most awkward part, for sure. And you could just take this all completely off of yourself and then cut it on the line that you drew. But I like to torture myself, I guess. I don't know, I didn't feel like putting all the pins back in after. Okay, now I'm gonna cut the shoulder seam right here. It just is not a great angle, so I'm gonna cut this a little more like that. Now I'm just gonna decide where the shoulder seam is gonna be because right here the fabric only goes to there, but then it angles back a little, which is a little weird. So I'm just gonna make this a bit of a straighter line. I also wanna add, we are going to be tracing this later onto paper, so if your edges are a little bit rough, it's fine, we'll smooth them out later. Alrighty, We have a decent shoulder seam happening. All right, now for the neckline, you basically just want to do a neckline that's as high as it can be while fitting you nicely. So I'm just going to draw on a neckline that looks decent. And remember, you can use this pattern later and adjust the neckline however you want. All right, that looks pretty good. And now I'm going to pin this back to the strap so that it stops flipping over like that. I'm going to take a little bit of a break for my shoulder just because it's kind of sore after all of that contortion and stuff, but I just want to talk real quick about how this is not going to look perfectly smooth right now, and there's reasons for that. It doesn't mean that you haven't fitted it properly. One of the reasons is there is not actually a skirt attached to this right now, so the skirt is not weighing it down, which sort of pulls the waist down and helps flatten it a little bit more. Another reason is this side seam is not currently attached to anything. When I have the back and everything is sewn together, this should fit better. So you should try as hard as you can to make this nice and smooth while you're drafting it, but if there's a few wrinkles and stuff, especially when you're moving, don't worry about it, it should be fine. And you can also do multiple drafts. You can try drafting this bodice once and then do a mock-up, see how it fits, and then alter it accordingly. I'm gonna get some chocolate. I'll be right back. Oh yeah. I feel my shoulder healing already. All right, it is now time to do the back piece of the bodice, and I have another piece of fabric with one perfectly straight edge. And this perfectly straight edge is going to go in the middle of my back. And yes, this is going to be awkward as well. So I'm just gonna basically act like I'm putting on a cape and try my best to line that up with the middle of my back. But once again, you're gonna wanna go pretty high on your neck. Okay, so the first thing we're gonna do is going to be a guess, because I'm just gonna kind of feel where this fabric is and just kind of guess where the neck should be cut. And I just cut it. So you can just go little by little to make sure that you don't totally screw it up, and then see how it fits. Amazingly, that is pretty decent. Okay, so the reason I did that is because I need to pin this part to this part, and this is pretty much what's going to hold the fabric up. And I'm just going to try and get that line in the middle of my back to be as straight as possible. So just like we did with the front piece, I'm going to stand with nice posture, straighten this out as much as possible, and pin it at my waist in the back. And I'm going to pin basically along that whole straight edge to keep it in the middle. When I turn to the front, you can see that because this spot right here is kind of holding it up, it's pulling on this a little bit. So I'm going to lift the middle of the back up a little to get rid of some of that strain. And then do my best to lay this flat over the shoulder. And this fabric at the shoulder is going to overlap the front substantially. And where I just overlapped the fabric on this shoulder, I'm going to pin it. Now you can see right here where we first pinned the back to the front, right where the neckline is, it's gotten a little bit weird because of how this has overlapped. So I'm going to take that pin out and try and lay that fabric again so that it's nice and smooth. And we are just going to pin it again. And that is much better. Okay, so where this fabric is overlapped on the shoulder, you're going to want to feel for where the shoulder seam we originally created was going to be. You can actually slightly see it because this fabric is a little bit see-through, and you're going to draw a line there. And then of course we're going to cut along that line. Be so careful not to cut yourself, I must be clear about that. And now I can take those pins out and get rid of this random little scrap and pick the back up again and see how it lines up. No, it is not the most beautiful straight line in the world, but it'll cut it. No pun intended. It does still overlap a tiny bit, but that's fine because this way I can pin it a little bit more easily. You can feel that the neckline as I cut it in the back is a little bit too small, so I'm going to cut it a little bit bigger. Okay, so now I need to try and smooth out the back as much as possible, starting at my shoulder. And there's once again a bunch of unnecessary fabric here, so I'm just going to chop this off. Okay, now I'm just going to try smoothing this out from my shoulder at the back down the side. So I've got this wrapped around the back of my arm to meet the side seam right here. And I'm just gonna draw a really rough armhole, and I'm gonna make it smaller than I think I need because it's always better to have too much fabric than not enough. I'm also going to very roughly draw the side seam just to get rid of a little bit more of this excess. And now we're gonna take this back piece off again so that I can cut the part that I just drew. I pretty much just unpinned the shoulder, and I'm gonna wrap it around to this side of my body so that I can see my pencil markings on this side of the fabric. Okay, now let me see what I did. And I'm gonna pin the shoulder back together. And I'm gonna overlap it at the side seam again and get rid of even more excess. So I'm just very, very slowly getting this closer and closer to the size that I need. I think the line I just drew is pretty decent, but I'm gonna wait until I can take this off of my body to cut that line a little more precisely. So I'm just gonna pin this side seam closed. All right, here is what we have. At the back, there's still some excess right here at the waist. So I'm just gonna pinch that excess and fold it and pin it to create another small dart. All right, so the back is obviously the hardest part, so I'm gonna do quite a bit of that after I've actually taken it off of my body. But there's a few things we can do right now. I'm gonna take my pencil right now and draw the armhole on the back piece. And I'm also gonna draw the waistline. And you'll probably find that the fit is a little bit weird around the back of the armhole. There's a little bit of excess right here, so I'm just going to pinch that and pin it out of the way. And I'm just gonna pin it sort of to itself so that this is still in place when I take this off of my body. Now I'm gonna take all of this off of my body and cut the line that I drew for the armhole and the waist. There's this little dart that I did at the back of the armhole, and I'm basically just gonna stick my scissors into that fold and cut this off. Here is the waistline. I'm just gonna cut that. And remember, the side seam was also overlapping a little bit more than necessary, so I'm going to cut that down a little bit. And here's the front piece. You can see the darts drawn on this, and I'm just going to cut them out real quick. And I like to keep math at a minimum, but there's going to be a little bit of math here, so I have my measuring tape, and I'm just going to measure the waist. When you're measuring the waist, you're gonna skip the gap where the dart is. So this bit is 2 1/4 inches, and this next bit is 4 inches, so that's 6 1/4. And here is the back piece, and the waist on that is 6 1/2. So 6 1/4 plus 6 1/2 is 12 3/4. The number you come out with here should be half of your waist measurement plus just a teeny little bit extra. My waist measurement is 24 inches, and this is 12 3/4 inches, so that's very close. But how do we make this actually fit the waist? The answer is we need one more dart on the back. So I'm just gonna turn this toward you. Here is the waistline here at the bottom. And this straight edge here is the center back. Just about 2 inches away from the center back on the waist, I'm going to make a little mark with my pencil. And remember that the half waist measurement we got here was 12 3/4 inches, and we need it to be 12 inches. So I'm gonna make a mark 3/4 of an inch away from this one. Those two marks are going to create the base of a very long, thin triangle. So I'm just going to draw a line up. And I'm going to cut out that very thin triangle. Now both of our pattern pieces are pretty much done, and I just need to clean up a few slightly rougher edges, and then we can start tracing these onto some paper. I've just cut my pieces out of brown wrapping paper, and now I'm going to tape them together so that I can try them on. Obviously this won't be the same as if I made it with fabric, but it'll give me a decent idea hopefully of how well it fits. And here is the bodice pattern all taped together. I am quite pleased with this. Let me show you the back. I did cut the armhole slightly bigger just so that it's a little more comfortable, but other than that, this is pretty much the pattern as I traced it. Of course, when you cut these pattern pieces out, you're going to fold the fabric in half and place this straight edge along the folded edge of your fabric. That way you'll get basically this mirrored for an entire front and an entire back. And also, depending on what kind of fabric you use to make the bodice for your actual project, you might notice other ways that it needs a little bit of adjustment in the fitting. But hopefully after seeing this and maybe trying it yourself, you understand darts a little bit better. People make them really complicated and they can be made very mathematical, but essentially what a dart is just pinching some fabric and just sewing your pinch into place. And that's basically it. And now that you have this pattern, you can adjust in all kinds of ways. You can change the neckline however you like. You can also change the waistline in a bunch of different ways. You can tape new pieces of paper to this as well. I'm just going to be cutting open the seams that I taped together for this so that I can use this paper as my actual pattern. Okay, it's actually a few months later, but I wanted to show you the dresses I've since made with the help of this bodice pattern, starting with this one. Since I made it, this is one of my favorite dresses in my wardrobe. I am absolutely obsessed with it, and I used the bodice pattern that we just made to make this. There are a few adjustments I made to the pattern to make this dress. One is that I flared the pattern pieces out below the waist so that I could have a drop waist. And then I cut the neckline so that it would be square. Then I also put a seam in the back to accommodate this V-shaped neckline. Let's put on the next dress. This is a little sailor style dress. The only adjustments I made to the pattern for this dress are, of course, I changed the neckline to a V, and I made it so it could open in the front so I could put these buttons in. Once again, another dress I'm just obsessed with. This last one might surprise you because, as you might be able to tell, it kind of looks nothing like our bodice pattern, but I actually did use that bodice pattern as the base for this pattern. This is just an example of using this pattern but super heavily altered. So I'll give you a little look. The changes I made to the pattern for this dress are incredibly extensive, so I'll try to sum it up concisely. I essentially laid out the pattern and drew lines where I wanted there to be seams. So I made there be a seam here, a seam here, a seam here, and the same at the back. Then for this little underbust gather right here, I took this piece and extended it a bit so that I would have to gather it to make it fit the other pattern pieces. I also cut out the pieces so that the bodice would be directly attached to the skirt panels. So those are just a few examples of the many things you can do with this bodice pattern. You can use it basically just as it is, maybe just change something simple like the neckline, or you can use it as the base to draft an entirely new pattern for a dress like this. So that's my method for drafting a basic bodice pattern. Obviously there are a million different ways that you can do this, and this way does have its drawbacks. It's kind of difficult to reach all the different parts of your body on yourself. One possible solution to this is if you have a friend who has a similar body type and size to you, you might be able to draft it on them and have it fit you reasonably. If you have any questions about this method or you try doing it yourself and you have some sort of issue, please let me know and I'd love to help you out in the comments. I can't wait to see what you guys might create with this bodice pattern tutorial. Let me know if it was helpful. And that would be it for today. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please comment, rate, subscribe, and all that jazz, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye! Whew, my arm is sore and the camera battery is dying. Why can I not get an angle that looks decent? Everything looks terrible.